This morning on The Real Story, we're taking a look at Connecticut's civic history centered at the capital city's old State House. This Preservation Month, the history you should know and your opportunities to engage with it. Plus, how can the past be seen in today's present? But first, we're checking back in with the Department of Transportation as statistics show Connecticut's roads can be deadly, and after a massive crew response to recent emergencies, we're talking everything from projects to safety and how Capitol Hill and Connecticut's capital are funding changes across the state. Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on The Real Story. I'm Emma Wulfhorst. It's a busy time for Connecticut's roads right now, from traveling to infrastructure projects, and we've seen some shocking and sometimes dangerous emergencies, all of that falling under the purview of the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Joining us now, their spokesperson, Josh Morgan. Josh, good as always to see you.
Thank you so much.
So as we said, it's a really busy time, and it was also quite a legislative session for CTDOT, so a lot to kind of catch up on. But let's start with Norwalk. The whole state watched as this fiery crash ended in a really massive traffic delay, and your crew's working days to take this bridge down and reopen those roadways, get things moving again. So walk me a little bit through that call, that response, and what comes next now.
Yeah, many of our crews got that call that something was wrong in Norwalk before they even had their first cup of coffee. That truck crashed, caught fire. Thankfully, the good news was that there was no serious injuries, no fatalities. But we, from 6 a.m. that Thursday morning through the weekend, we were all hands on deck, from the folks that were responding to the initial incident to the inspectors that were checking the bridge integrity to see what the future of that structure would be, and then our engineers who were back in our headquarters in Newington coming up with a plan to what the future bridge will look like when the decision was ultimately made that it needed to come down.
Right, and this was, as you said, really shocking for a lot of people, I think, to see this, and President Biden speaking about it and saying federal funds are going to come to Connecticut to fix that overpass. We also saw something similar recently with the Gold Star Bridge last year. Talk to me about what these responses take from an operational standpoint and planning. Can you ever really be prepared for this? And, if so, how does CTDOT try and get ready for these sort of unexpected emergencies?
Yeah, our planning starts with how are we going to respond if there's any roadway incident, whether it's on the bridge, on a highway, smaller structure, even the largest structure like the Gold Star Memorial Bridge.
Right.
Our training starts with how are we going to respond and what does each person need to do. So clearly understanding roles, responsibilities. So the Gold Star incident, that was a case where tragically there was a loss of life. But from an infrastructure standpoint, we got lucky that the fuel that was burning did not get hot enough to do any significant damage to the structural steel. Obviously, we did not get the same luck in Norwalk, where that fuel tanker burned underneath the Fairfield Avenue overpass.
Right. And you all have been recognized for this hard work in responding to these emergencies. I don't think anyone, especially in Norwalk, we really expected that road to be open quite as soon as it was, just a few days after that accident. So we also know we're in road work season right now. A lot of people see crews out, even here in downtown Hartford, so many crews working on different projects here and across the state. We know sometimes people can get annoyed with this, annoyed that so much road work is going on and that things are closed, and that can sometimes cause a dangerous situation for your crews. That's something the department has really been trying to draw attention to. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, speeds are up on our roads. The rates of distracted driving are up on our roads. And when you couple that with lane closures or traffic pattern shifting because of all the road work that's happening across Connecticut as we're looking to transform our state's infrastructure and make it safer and more accessible for the public, that comes with increased dangers for the men and women who are working on the roads, working behind those barrels and cones. And so that's why it's so important we tell the public, we don't like sitting in traffic ourselves. We don't like being late to a function, but we want to make sure that our crews go home safely at the end of the day. And we want you to get to your destination alive.
And we have seen these situations which cause danger for both drivers and for the crews who are working out there. Governor Lamont just signed your road safety bill into law. That was a big suggestion in this short session. Break down for me what that will do here.
Yeah, last year we had a pilot program having work zone speed safety cameras.
Right.
This legislation does a number of things, but it does codify into state law that work zone camera program permanently. So what that means is that most likely starting next year, more speed safety cameras will be out in Connecticut work zones across the state, because we saw driver behavior change. The pilot program was a proof point that when there is this automated enforcement in work zones, people were slowing down. Talking to the men and women who are in these work zones, they felt safer. They felt the difference. People who are doing these jobs can feel what 60 miles an hour feels like because of the wind compared to what 80 or 90 miles an hour feels like. So we're certainly very thankful to the legislature, to the governor for supporting this bill, to Governor Lamont for signing it into law. The men and women of the DOT and the contractors who are working around the state, thank them as well, because their jobs are going to be a little bit safer now because of this technology.
Yeah, and you mentioned that's a really big part of this, is that technology to try and reduce those speeds, whether it be in work zones or, you know, in different areas of the state as well. You know, you and Garrett, the commissioner of the CTDOT, have said to us before that, you know, if people could just slow down, which is always an easy thing to say, but we know is harder to make people actually do. So do you think with these cameras obviously focusing majorly on speed, that is really going to make that much of a difference, or are there other parts here that aren't just speeding?
Yeah, there's other components to this bill. If there's different developments, a lot of mixed-use developments that are happening around Connecticut that are generating a lot of additional traffic, it gives us a little bit more power to make sure that the roadway infrastructure is updated to make sure that, you know, the more vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists in that area are going to be protected. So everything that we're putting forward to the legislature, everything we do is about improving safety in Connecticut.
Yeah, and you know, as we see these other projects going on, one of those big ones that we've seen a lot of people talking about is wrong way driving and crashes. That's been a huge focus for your department. You've hit some major milestones recently when it comes to the signage and the flashers. That funding was okayed for those last session. Tell me a little bit about where you are now with that project.
Yeah, we're moving very quickly. We have more than 50 ramps currently across Connecticut that have this wrong way alert technology. Not only is it giving the public and the motorist real-time feedback from the field with the flashing lights, it's also alerting state police and our highway operations center that there is a potential for a wrong way driver. We get those alerts, and within seconds we're on the phone with state police. We're pulling up traffic cameras, seeing if that car continued onto the highway in the wrong direction or if they stopped and turned around. So we've seen some good results from the program. Unfortunately, we have people continue onto the highway in the wrong direction, but thankfully there haven't been crashes resulting from those wrong way incidences.
And you're saying this technology is helping these rates go down, but I think anytime we talk about this, you know, we hear from people, whether it be viewers or even our coworkers in our own newsroom, people always talk about Connecticut's high rate of wrong way driving and wrong way crashes. And there's always a lot of conversation around, is that people operating under the influence, or is it just confusion? Because we do know Connecticut roadways have confusing signage, you know, have entrances and exits right next to each other. But I've heard you talk about how DUIs and driving under the influence is a huge part of this. Can you tell me a little bit about, you know, what you're finding? Is it mostly from under the influence, or is it also too just people being confused driving at night?
Yeah, so there is some confusion. Certainly if it's, you know, middle of the night, a lot of rain or fog could make the ramps a little bit harder to see. But by and large, when these crashes happen, and they're often fatal, the toxicology reports come back and we find that the driver is DUI. They are over the legal limit. We're also seeing that there's a lot of poly use, so it's not just alcohol, it's alcohol and other drugs, prescription or illegal, that are happening. And it's a problem in Connecticut. Other states like Utah and Maine are also experiencing increased rates of wrong way crashes. And when the data is telling us that virtually all of the drivers are impaired by alcohol, we need to tell the public, you are putting yourself at risk, you are putting others at risk. Do not get behind the wheel if you're impaired.
Yeah, and I know you've said before that Connecticut kind of has a drinking and driving problem. Really quickly, what's that part of it? Is it just awareness? Is it just getting that message out there?
It's a awareness campaign, but it's also a partnership with state and local law enforcement to get these dangerous drivers off the road before they crash, hurt somebody, kill somebody. Nationally, we are top 3 or top 5 every single year with the percentage of fatalities caused by drunk drivers. The national average is about 30%. Connecticut, it's about 40% of all of our roadway fatalities are caused by an impaired driver. These are preventable crashes if people took the responsible thing to do and drove sober.
And switching gears a little bit here about this past legislative session, when it comes to some of the possible developments here in the state that fall under your department, we know the electric vehicle mandate and study didn't make it anywhere this past session, but we have already seen more hybrid and electric vehicles out on our roadways, and those in the auto industry are saying that it just is going to increase in the coming years. We've had so many conversations about this, about the infrastructure needed. You've now opened up a survey to try and create that conversation. What's that looking like?
Yeah, we have a survey available now through May 31st. We're trying to gauge public sentiment. Do you own an EV? Tell us why, and where would you like to see more EV chargers? If you currently don't have an EV, what's stopping you from making that investment? Is it because there's not enough chargers? Is it because of a price point? So we're trying to get that data. We have more than 1,000 responses already, so we want more people to submit their feedback. We have money from the federal infrastructure law to expand electric vehicle chargers in Connecticut. So we have proposals that we're reviewing to start building out alternative fuel corridors in the state, because it's not a matter of if the EV revolution is coming, it's a matter of when. The industry is trending this way. So we want to make sure that our infrastructure is ready to handle that transition when it does come.
How important is it for the department to have that input from residents here?
It's very important, from EV chargers to different public projects, whether it's a bridge, a highway, EV chargers. We take community and stakeholder input very seriously. It's very important to what we do.
We know that in the short term, your crews are working on projects all across the state, as we've said, but in the long term, you have some bigger infrastructure projects coming, like bridge work, and we know the Greater Hartford Mobility Study, that lowering of I-84. This past legislative session, one of the main concerns was really slowing and the even complete stoppage of federal funding in various sectors. But we know for CTDOT, you've actually gotten a lot of focus from Capitol Hill lately, and Connecticut has seen some of the biggest, federal funding grants and amounts of money coming in for transportation work. What impact has that had for your department on sort of the bigger scale here of getting not only these short-term, but these long-term projects done? And do you think you're going to see more funding coming in, the near future?
Yeah, the federal infrastructure law provided 40% more funding for the Department of Transportation. Basically, every single project that people are seeing across Connecticut has that federal funding built into it. The infrastructure law also created a discretionary grant program. The governor likes to say that Connecticut punches above its weight, and this is certainly true when it comes to grants. We've received over $2 billion in federal grants to improve bridges, to improve trains, to improve our infrastructure. You talk about what that means. The Gold Star Memorial Bridge received a $158 million federal grant, which means that project is going to finish up 1 year sooner, and that frees up money to go to other projects as well. So more work, more jobs, more projects, and safer infrastructure at the end of the day.
And we're getting into summer travel season, Memorial Day weekends. We know a lot of people are going to be out there on their roadways. So thank you so much for coming on and giving us a little check-in of what's happening with DOT.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You as well, but don't go anywhere here. We have more to talk about. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the Constitution State's civic history. Starting at the old State House, now preserving the past is creating family fun and relevant lessons today, plus pieces of that history you might not have heard of. That's coming up next.